Suicide anyone. That's the title of this message. Suicide anyone. Or we could call it big government health care versus the sanctity of life. Canada has a program called doctor-assisted suicide. And by the way, you don't have to, this new program, you do not have to have a terminal diagnosis for them to assist you in offing yourself. Doctor-assisted, so it's not like those where you're a couple weeks from dying, and it's not that, it's additional to that. So they started this program, and after the first year, 2016, 2017, it's grown 450%. Let me say that again, 450%. And it's not just getting elderly people, you know, that's probably what you would normally think. There's this one doctor, and she's bragging about how she's assisted over 500 people in committing suicide. And she says they even have wake parties where they, you know, I guess they're celebrating their loved one, and she gives them something to put them to sleep and, you know, injects them, and they're gone. And you think, wait, that's kind of, I'm not making this up, because I know it sounds almost beyond belief when you hear this sort of thing. And what do they call this wonderful program in Canada? You know, that semantic tyranny where you give it a good name, where if anybody opposes it, how could you be opposed to equal rights amendment? By the way, we won't go into why that's not such a good thing, but you all understand how they work that. Or the Inflation Reduction Program was really more about global warming and overspending, but you all understand it. Well, in the semantic tyranny, they've come up with something in Canada called MAID. When you think of a maid, you think of someone who's cleaning up and caring for you, right? Well, here's what MAID means in Canadian medical thing. It stands for M, medical, A, assisted, the I, N, and the D, dying. So MAID means medical assistance in dying. But they don't call it that, they call it MAID. Doesn't that sound so much beautiful? And there are a lot of people are caught in this situation where a lot of them have deep depression and mental problems, but sometimes other kind of problems, because there's such a backlog in the medical system in Canada. A lot of actually come across the border of America and just pay for it themselves because it's better. Like if you got to wait a year to get your hip fixed, depending on your age, that could be, anyway, I'm going into all the gruesome details, but some people they were talking with had to wait a long time for health care counseling. They said, oh, we got a big backlog. They would tell them that, big backlog. But I'm suffering now. Well, you have a choice. You can wait the 9 or 10 months for counseling, or you can get MAID right now. I'm not making this up, because it almost sounds like I'm making this up. But this is going on in what we call liberal Western countries, like I think the Netherlands and Belgium kind of started it, but Canada is really picking up steam in this program. Now, some of the new things they want to do, kind of on ice, because when Trudeau stepped down, Canada has no parliament until they have another. It's kind of like, but they're working. Actually, they're working on a program that's so crazy. When I tell you about it, and I assume they'll have it going in 2027, where now that they're giving so many people MAID, you know, medical assisted suicide, they said, well, why waste their organs? Why not get them this, you know, once we decide we're going to MAID, we'll put you in a coma. While you're still alive, we'll harvest your organs. We'll save the medical healthcare system a ton of money. Now, you know, you get 2 lungs, 1 heart, was it 2 kidneys? I'm probably exaggerating a little bit. You get 1 uterus. I mean, anyway, don't worry about the details. But you get 1 bladder. Think of all the, you get 1 kidney, which you could probably divide up. And I'm not making this up. The reason why that is so outrageous, there was a sci-fi movie in the 60s, I believe it's 60s, where the government was killing people to harvest the organ. That was a big horror story that the hero reporter found out near the end. Well, what was considered sci-fi horror is actually coming true. In the I believe it's Netherlands. This is back a decade or so. They gave people a card, and you had to carry the card in your wallet. Don't kill me card. Now, what the don't kill me card was, if you got in a car wreck and you were seriously injured, since the government healthcare has control of your body, they'd say, nah, the damage they got is so serious that it's just going to be a waste of money to patch them all up. Why don't we just, give them a little morphine or whatever they choose to do and send them on their way, save us a lot of money. I'm not making this up, but if you carried the card, that meant they were supposed to put all effort into keeping you alive. Otherwise, they might just take that option. And in many of those far Western leftist countries, it used to be you had to have a terminal diagnosis or you get counseling, and maybe your kid said that, well, Dad's really not himself. You need to put him out of his misery. You had to get some kind of counseling to do that. But now they've changed the rules. If you're 75 and over, no counseling, just you're eligible for it, and we're willing to give it to you just like that. Nothing, no counseling, no investigation. After all, if you're 75, what have you got to contribute to society? Now, I'm saying that from their point of view, the big government healthcare. I don't believe that, but that's their perspective. This one young man went to the library. He said, I want to find a quick, easy, and safe way to commit suicide. Have you got any books on it? The library said, well, we had one book, and it was checked out, but it was never returned. Yeah, never returned. Well, but if you have a government that has a total healthcare system, they take the approach they own your body. I know when you think about that, it's kind of scary, but that's how they look at it. And if they can find a way to save resources. So in Canada, counselors will often say, even if you're maybe homeless, you got other problems, they'll offer MAID as a quick, easy option to end your problems. And we're not talking about elderly people. I mean, middle-aged, and some even young people. They could easily come out of their depression and live a great, productive life, but they're making it easy. Take the easy way. And it's unbelievable. And what we think is happening is, in the past, people had a certain biblical Christian belief, like a guardrail against suicide. I remember when I was a kid, we used to hear about some movie star committing suicide. We thought that was the craziest thing. We would laugh. Who would kill themselves because of some horrible life problem? I mean, we would laugh at it. There was a guardrail. No reasonable person would commit suicide. Not true. There's a large percentage, especially of younger people, they call them none. None means no religious affiliation. They don't believe in the Bible. They don't believe in God. And if you're an atheist, what have you got to live for? There's no higher purpose. There's no afterlife. So if life is tough, take the easy way out. Pop the pill. And so the guardrails against suicide are going down, down, down because people have less religious. And I even think some of the liberal Christian churches are they don't speak against it. Like, especially in Western countries, if you're, those churches are more about happiness, music, and fun, and they don't get into doctrinal issues like, don't kill yourself. Murder is against God's law, including murdering yourself. Now, I'm not talking about terminal illness, a person that's 2 weeks from a horrible death by some horrible disease. That's maybe a whole nother issue. These are different. It's called a rising culture of death. And what I want to advocate for is that we Christians, all believers, learn to appreciate life. We learn to appreciate the life that God has given us. Appreciate life. And in appreciating life, we have to learn to love ourselves. And I think you can't love others correctly until you learn to love yourself. And I'm going to read 2 scriptures here real quickly, but I think you can see the point. You've got to learn to love yourself before you can love others. Luke 6:31 reads, Luke 6:31. Christ says, "As you would that men should do to you, do you also to them." Well, if you're masochistic and you're depressed and whatever, and you don't like yourself, you don't like the world, you're going to do that to others? No. The assumption Christ is making is that you love yourself, and he's saying, and take that same approach to others. Matthew 7:12. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. In other words, God's law backs up taking care of others like you want to take care of yourself. But if you don't want to take care of yourself, how are you going to want to take care of others? If you want to murder yourself, now they call it MAD. I mean, MAID. Medical assisted death. It sounds so good, but if you don't care for yourself, how can you care for others? If you don't like yourself, you can't love others. 1 Peter 2:9. 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. Peter is saying we Christians, believers in Christ, followers of Jesus Christ, are a royal priesthood. Now, if you think of a royal priesthood, here's what the priesthood would have. Actually, all of Israel was special in some ways, and we can go over that later. But the priesthood, they got to wear special clothes. And in those days, clothing was much more expensive. They didn't have factories with looms. So it was, when you read the Old Testament, clothing is a big deal. But they had special clothing with royal colors like purple and blue, which were a big deal in those days. And the priests had special gowns, and actually the high priest had all these jewels that were very valuable. But the priesthood, they had special linen tunics. Anyway, they were special. Well, Peter's saying we are special, and we should consider ourselves special. Now, I don't think he means that in an arrogant, I hate other people attitude. We'll get to that later. But he means we are special. Why are we special? Because Christ paid for us. A high price was paid for us. We are a royal priesthood. A holy nation. That means, holy means set apart for use by God. We are a holy nation. A peculiar people. And I think he means peculiar not in that, y'all are strange and crazy. He means more like special. Because you get that. I know some people say that, you all are peculiar. I've heard that said about me. I don't understand you, man. You're doing things that I don't. Anyway, I wouldn't do. That you should show forth the praises of him who's called you. We've been called, and only a small percentage are called in this first round. Called you out of darkness into marvelous light. The world is in darkness, some places darker than others. By the way, some third world countries, life is really cheap. You see how people are pushed around, and even in some modern countries like China, the way they handle people, life is cheap. I'm not putting any particular country down, but I think you know what I mean. That is not the way America is. Even in this Israeli hostage thing, you notice that Israel is probably going to exchange 30 hostages for 1,000 Hamas fighters, because the Israelis, have the same Bible we do, appreciate life more than the other side does. They actually don't mind using civilians as cover. Oh, they're dying. Life is cheap. And you study World War II, and the Russians had, in those days, they had plenty of men. They would just send men after waves. Life was cheap, whatever it takes to win. Well, God and Christianity is not that way. Life is precious. And you can see how medically assisted suicide cheapens life. It really does. It cheapens life. And if you think about it for a second, the sanctity of life is important if you're a true Christian. The sanctity of life is important. We are important because Christ paid for us. 1 Corinthians 3:16. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Know you not that you are the temple of God, that the Spirit of God dwells in you. We talked about the temple of God in the podcast last night, and about the physical things and the spiritual things. But at a spiritual level, God's Holy Spirit dwells in our little weakened physical body. As we get older, it's wearing down. As the doctor says, your brain is wearing out. So I think, yeah, that's good to know. But at any rate, we are the temple of God. And that means we're valuable. We are valuable. So here's what I would get out of that. If we're valuable, we should take care of ourselves. That means take care of your physical body, your mind, and our spirits, all three, because they all work together. As you get older, there's less things you can do, like exercise and all that other stuff. But what we can do, we should try and do. Get enough sleep, eat a good diet, have raw fruits and vegetables and lean meats, or, whatever. But take care of our bodies, and most of all, take care of our spirits. I think one thing about setting aside a day for God, like the Sabbath, it's helping our spirits. And even though we may have problems with the darkness of the world, if every week you can get a boost of your spirits, that's good for us. Because we're the temple of God and His Spirit dwells in little old weak physical us. In the age of the devil, they have people not caring about burning themselves out on drugs, wild sex, and other dangerous things. Or getting drunk all the time. You know what I mean by burning yourself out. You can almost see a dichotomy in the death rate where those who really lived a wild, crazy life, they often die about 60. And those who take care of themselves, well, I know we could argue about death rates, it's complicated, but probably live to 78 or 80 or longer. Almost like a 20-year gap between people who live a reasonable life and those who burn the candle at both ends. I'm going to have all the fun I can, and a lot of that stuff is bad for you in more ways than you might imagine. But remember, I think a lot of people do it because they don't think they're special in the sense in which I mean it, because they don't believe in God. If there's no God, you have no purpose, and both the big government, medical, and everybody else, you have no special purpose, you're costing us money. You're over 75, you're going to cost us money. We can kind of move you along and get you out of the way. 1 Corinthians 6:19. 1 Corinthians 6:19. What? Know you not that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, which is in you, which you have of God, and you are not your own. We are not our own. When it says we're not our own, I think Paul is saying you belong to God. And you, in your body, mind, and spirit, you have something that belongs to God, and you better try and take care of it. It's not yours to waste and squander and burn. And I'm not saying don't have fun, but have clean fun, healthy fun that doesn't damage you and your spirit and your relationships and all that kind of stuff. There is no such thing as free love in the way in which they mean it. Free sex, free love. You're going to be some emotional damage if you do too much of that sort of thing. We have to learn to love and nourish our minds, bodies, spirits, because God and Christ are in us through the Holy Spirit. How bad has it gotten in the West? I told you about the Netherlands. You had to carry that card that said, I want to live, don't kill me card. They may have backed off some of that, but a lot of it's earth worship. You know, the earth worship people believe there are too many people on the planet. The planet is here for trees and grass and little tiny fish and worms. I'm not making it up. That's what they believe. You're going to say, well, why did California get rid of, I think it's 3 dams, 2 or 3 dams of reservoir water, which they desperately need to fight fires because they can fill up their reservoirs quicker, over one little smelt fish that they said was hampered from swimming upstream. I'm not making this up. That means many people will die and billions of dollars worth of damage. And by the way, the smelt fish problem, but a lot of other animals will die in these forest fires. So it's really actually hurting animals too. I could get into more things, but if you believe in that earth worship, people are the problem. If you think that way, people are the problem, then why not get them to commit suicide and get out of the way of the healthcare system as fast as you can? Because we don't, I've even heard some big rich people say the earth doesn't need more than 400 or 500 million people, even though I think it's 6 to 7 billion now. And I've heard people they made those arguments many, many decades ago. Oh, they'll all starve. No, we won't. They've been able to up food production. Now, I will admit there's mismanaged by socialist governments and leftist governments, but the truth is there is enough food, and if they hadn't screwed things up with overregulation, et cetera, there'd be enough housing too. The world, earth is made for man, not man for the earth. You got to think about that for a minute. God made earth as an environment for man, and we're not here. I mean, we're to preserve the earth and take care of it. I'm not saying you should, be bad to the environment or start fires or do bad stuff. Although the more homeless people you have, the more fires you're going to have. Because think about it, a whole bunch of homeless people, half of them crazy and on drugs, and they got little campfires. They know how to, you block off a campfire with bricks and stuff so the fire can't get out of the campfire. Well, they're not going to do that carefully and responsibly, right? Wind blows around. Well, anyway, the earth is here to serve us. But if you think the way the world thinks, because there is no God, they forget that we are a royal priesthood. Now, there is a little bit of good news. Not too long ago, Oregon was the first state that started this pushing mass suicide in America, like what they have in the Netherlands. And England is into it now, too, by the way, as well as Canada, should mention. But in the last 2 election cycles, they put on the ballot in other states. I think maybe only Washington and Oregon State have picked it up. No other state has picked it up. It's been voted down the last 2 election cycles. I consider that good news, that maybe America is not as far gone as Canada, England, and some of those other Western European liberal countries. At least that's good news. I hope it stays that way. I guess we will see. But they're tricky with their ads, like with abortion in Missouri. If you looked at those abortion ads, you didn't realize there's a whole bunch of other stuff that they put in there that's really horrible. Like transgender surgeries into the very 9th month to like a minute or 2 before the kid is born. They didn't tell you all that. The ads are slick. They'll probably have some slick ads about medical assisted suicide. It's good for the elderly. It's good for society. It'll save Medicare a ton of money. You realize it, but you're violating God's law. Even if it does save Medicaid a lot of money. There was actually a Star Trek episode. I don't know if I get this accurately. The Star Trek episode, Spock, who's logic and not emotion, and they went to this planet where they had suicide so they could all stay young and all that other good stuff and wouldn't waste resource on the elderly. Spock said, this is so logical, it's wonderful. Captain Kirk said, well, this is inhuman. And then all of a sudden, as the episode went on, Spock learned that when you get 65 in this society, you're supposed to off yourself, or whatever version they had of it. Spock thought, wait a minute, I'll be at that age soon. He changed his mind. Well, you see it was a funny episode. But it's all funny, like when you're young, when you get old, you should commit suicide. But you get old faster than you think. And you go, wait a minute, I'll be there in a few years. I'm not gonna do that. But at least Americans are moving in the right direction. I'm hoping America has some level of Bible revival. Put those guardrails against suicide up there. And by the way, they also have a trend. I saw this, some news item last year, and I think it was Fox News, but I may have gotten it wrong, where they have these sex parties where they choke each other right here. Well, they're having sex, but they let up at the last minute, sort of like we're playing death and sex together. Don't ask me how it works. I'm just telling you what I saw on the news. And hopefully you get close to death, but then it's a great experience, they claim. And maybe you're high on drugs at the same time. But sometimes it goes wrong. Well, I didn't mean to kill her. I just held on too long. And the girl, I didn't know her throat was that. You understand how crazy that sort of thing is. But if life isn't sacred, you see there are all kinds of weird things that people can do. Hopefully that's not going to be happening. And what the world does is, it's a clever lie. I think the guy who invented PR called it semantic tyranny. By mislabeling things, you get people can't speak against it and you can promote it. Like abortion. They don't promote it as abortion, they promote it as women's reproductive rights. Well, who can be against women's reproductive rights? See how nice it sounds? Or for suicide, you call it maid care. Who can be against maid care? It sounds so antiseptic and nice, right? Or sterilizing teenagers. I mean, you surgically remove their sex organs and other gruesome stuff so they can never have kids. And anyway, they call it minor affirming health care. Who can be against minor affirming health care? Or killing elderly people long before God's going to take them. You call it eugenics. Doesn't that sound nice? Eugenics? Hope I get the word, pronouncing it correctly. It sounds nice, doesn't it? The devil is very clever. I'm going to tell you a stupid joke. Mr. Doofus says, I need some time off. So he climbs up to the rafters in the big warehouse where they work, and he hangs them upside down with his feet. Don't ask me how he does it, but he does it. The foreman comes there and says, what are you doing hanging up there, Mr. Doofus? And he says, I'm a light bulb. He says, you need to go home and get some rest. You're confused. So he climbs down. He's walking out the door going home. Just what he wanted. And then Mrs. Doofus starts walking out with him. And the foreman says, well, where are you going? She says, you can't expect me to work in the dark, can you? And that stupid joke is supposed to remind us of the point that there are people who believe you can be anything you want. If you want to be a light bulb, you can be a light bulb. If you want to be a cat, and I'm not making this up, there are people, I saw a guy with a tail, I mean, it was artificially made, but he had a cat's tail stuck on behind his jacket. I'm a cat. Or I'm somebody who will decide for myself when I die. You realize God makes that decision. Life and death is in God's hands. And I know people argue about, the cruelty of death, and nobody wants to die. And so I'm at that age where we're all worried about it too. But truth is, it's in God's hands. He decides that. We don't decide it. Well, I'm 45 and I'm depressed. I think I'm going to decide it's time for me to go. That is not your decision. And by the way, this idea that suffering is a bad thing, I could get in trouble. This is a deep topic. I just want to say something briefly. I think life is not so simple that we can expect everybody to go through life without having to suffer some. You might suffer with this disease, that disease, problems with your kids, a little depression, or your business goes bad and you're struggling. But in all those cases, there's something to be said for struggling, fighting for your life, coming back. And a lot of people, man was talking about his mother, the only one to graduate from that place where they send people to go to die. she made a surprising comeback, lived a number of years, and she said they were actually some of her best years with him and the family. Or there are people who thought their business was over, life had gone bad, everything has gone to disaster. But sometimes you hit rock bottom, you learn a few lessons, and in a few years, your luck turns around and you're successful again. And you're prosperous and happy again. It's not up to you to decide, this is it. That's not our decision. It's God's decision. And sometimes hard times can be good for people. And trials and challenges can be good for people. I know there's a whole lot you can say about suffering, but I do think if you suffer a little bit, you do not need to say, give me the injection. I want out of here. It's not our decision to make. Colossians 1:27, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. When you're depressed and things aren't going well, remember, Christ in you, the hope of glory. But glory will be ours if we persevere. If we persevere, appreciate ourselves, appreciate our opportunity, yet remain humble. Now, you're going to love yourself, but in a humble way. By the way, humility and liking yourself are not contradictory. People just don't understand what true humility is. Moses had a lot of confidence. He was a good, strong leader, but God said he was the humblest man in the world. You probably don't think of that way, but that's what God said about Moses. Luke 18:9, and this is a parable of Christ to make a point. Also, he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves. Don't trust in yourself too much. That they were righteous and despised others. I'm better than other people. I don't have the human nature others do. And two men went up to the temple, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. And by the way, religious activities like the Pharisees did are really the easiest thing to do. You know, I fast, skip a meal or two here or there. I tithe a certain amount, or I attend certain services. Nothing wrong with any of that. But actually the hardest part is resisting human nature. Resisting human nature and try to grow with God. The Pharisee stood and prayed with himself, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men. Can you imagine? That's like saying, I don't have human nature like other people do. That can be greedy, selfish. Yes, you do. Everybody does. And we're kidding yourself if you think, well, I was born special. You other people are greedy and jealous and petty and selfish. Not me. I'm always pious and righteous. You're just self-righteous and you don't know yourself. And I won't go into the rest of that, but the guy who was a tax collector, who humbled himself and realized he was a sinner, as a guy that was blessed. Like John says in 1 John, if you say you have no sins, you're a liar. You know, if you say your human nature is above it all, you're deceiving yourself or you're lying. Humility and loving oneself correctly work together. And remember, people of low self-esteem have a lot of friction and trouble. It's just the way it is. If you learn to love yourself, you'll have less problems. A humble person has an accurate view of themselves. But that includes knowing we're valuable. Why? Because of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not going to read the scripture, but in Philippians 2:15-18, here's what Paul says, basically. Paul says, and remember, Paul is in jail, probably, at least, I'm not sure if this is when he got executed or not, but facing a potential execution. But he's writing a church to encourage them when he is facing possible execution. And what he tells them is, he said, look, I, Paul, have sacrificed a lot for you, the Philippian Christians. Don't let me down. Don't make my work in vain. Move toward, maturity and spiritual growth. In other words, we should love and nourish ourselves spiritually, not but for Jesus Christ, sacrifice, but also for the sacrifice of many Christian leaders who've gone before us. Now, Paul was talking about the Philippians, but the principle would apply to us too. There are a lot of people who've died and suffered so we could have the Bible. You probably know that story. And I believe there are people in the churches in the past that we're here because of their sacrifice, probably financially and time and in effort, and writing booklets. And by the way, if you look at the correspondence courses in the back of 20th Century Watch, some great material. Most of those things were written by the church 50, 60, 70 years, by a lot of men that have passed away. I got to know some of them. But help develop ourselves because of the people that have gone before us. Don't waste what we've done by don't let it go in vain. Many leaders for centuries have worked hard, and so we're valuable. So take care of our mind, our spirit,